this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. My guest and I are going to hit quite a few touch points today. We're going to talk about group practice ownership, selling your practice, starting over in a completely different state, and consulting with other providers who are doing a lot of the same. Jennifer Vincent, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm so excited.
I am so looking forward to this conversation. You do so many things that are obviously of interest to me, are of interest to our listeners. So give everybody some background, share with us the aspects of your journey that are helpful for us to understand what it is that you have going on now.
Yeah, I started a group practice back in 2016, and then the pandemic hit, and I had quite a few interns who were losing their internships and sites because they were placed in like hospital settings and things like that, and they had reached out to private practice settings to see if they can get hired. And at that point, I was like, I could maybe hire some people and start that process. I was really unfamiliar with how that worked. I had no idea what I was doing at the very beginning, but I slowly started to hire folks and all of that. And then I moved pretty quickly from a smaller office into a much bigger office, and then just started to kind of grow from there. So I've been a therapist specializing in trauma and LGBT and childhood, teenage kind of family dynamics, divorces, that kind of stuff for many years. And then I sold that practice in 2024. So last summer, I wanted to move to Florida, and then I had to start all over again. So I started a new practice, therapy for cycle breakers, in Largo, Florida. And I still see clients in Indiana as well, and started all over here. So I took the summer off, and then kind of just slowly getting my feet wet with starting a new practice, new website, and all of that. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure.
To say the least. All right, so let's break it down step by step. So
Cool.
If we start with your transition into group practice, reflecting on that experience, and now going into starting over. Is there anything that you are planning to do differently? What were the biggest learning curves from that time? And what do you think would be helpful for the listeners to know about kind of having that opportunity to do over?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I was really excited. I wanted this new adventure. I had lived in Indianapolis for 15 years or so, and was kind of just outgrowing that space and just kind of outgrowing the city a little bit. And my family lives in Florida. So I was really excited to move. And at the time I was like, I know how to do this. Like, I totally know how to do a group practice. So moving will be really easy. But there's definitely been some learning curves because I've had to do things really differently. And I was telling you before we started that in Indianapolis, in the old practice, I was really networked in with the community. I'd been there for so long. I was in community mental health. People knew our practice, and we had specific niches that other practices didn't have. So I didn't really have to work as hard as like networking or marketing. Where now coming to Florida, I don't know anyone. I don't have any referral sources. I don't have any of that. So what's been different for me here is social media has been a huge, huge thing for practice here. Like getting your name out there, trying to like get people to know you, like who are you? And then working a little bit harder to network. So who are my people I want to network with? Who do I want to refer clients to if I need to for whatever reason? So I've had to do that a lot more. And then learning curves about like the website, like having a really good like website, having good like SEOs, that kind of thing. So I think the difference is like which heart are you kind of choosing? It's like one felt a little bit easier and smooth sailing versus here felt a little bit more challenging of like, where do I kind of start? And so there's been a little bit more kind of learning strategies here. And so what's different is definitely social media. Social media has been like huge. So growing that. Yeah.
And what about the aspects of building a group? So going through that experience in your other practice, and then I'm assuming that this practice is also going to be group.
Yes.
What are some thoughts that you have going into building a team again?
Yeah, building a team again is really interesting. I think what I've learned too, like just being group practice, like some staff who I did hire kind of just came to me. They knew about our practice, they knew about me or knew about another staff. Other staff have been like, hire my friends, they're great. And like that has worked out. Whereas here, because people don't know about me, so I'm not connected to any of the schools or just the process of hiring here. So what I've learned too is like vetting really well. So really vetting people, interviewing multiple times with staff so that you have a good team. My office space here is a lot smaller as well. So we were in 2,600 square feet, 9 offices.
Okay.
So we had a huge space. Here it's 1,100 square feet, 3 offices. So it's a lot different. So I think vetting well, making the team here a lot smaller, because I want to reduce my caseload a little bit too and do more consulting stuff, which tends to be more virtual. So I think, vetting and hiring really well to make it like more long-term staff. So people stay longer than like maybe licensure or that kind of thing.
So your decision to sell the practice, was that primarily because you wanted to move, or were there other contributing factors?
Yeah, I think mostly I would say probably 90% was because I wanted to move. So I knew I was moving for probably like 2 or 3 years before I did. My mom had already moved down here and I wanted to be closer to her. So I knew, but then financially too, like being able to provide for my family in a way I never thought possible. It's really funny because years before, so when I was in community mental health, I had people ask like, aren't you going to do private practice now? And I had absolutely no intention. I stayed years longer than licensure. Most people get licensed and they leave. I stayed for several more years. I liked it. But then financially, you need to make a little bit more. You want to see less clients, have a little bit better quality of life as well. And so starting private practice, I really surprised myself with doing it, but I was really good at it and I love doing it. And so it was partially between financial, like having some extra cushion for things, and then being able to relocate. There was a short period of time where I was going to manage both and like fly back every few months and like help staff. And I had lots of people talk me out of that. So, and I'm glad that I did, because once we got here, life was really hectic and crazy for a good few months.
So the process of selling your practice. So you had a plan that you were going to move. Then when you were finally decided that you were making that leap, what were some of the steps involved, the things that you did to ensure that it was successful? Kind of reflecting back on that, what would be helpful for someone to know that's considering getting their practice to a point where it can be sold?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question because I really didn't know what I was doing at first. I think the biggest thing was really kind of figuring out if I wanted to sell, like truly having to like process through that, because it's such a big decision. Like I lived there for so long. I had clients that I loved. I had staff that I love and care about. And I've like helped them grow over years. We were a small office. So I think for me, having to really process through, do I want to do this? Because it's emotional too. So once I did that, talked with my spouse and processed through, like, does this actually work? You kind of think of a couple different things. So one, we talked about this too, like getting a mentor. So whether that's like a business coach or even somebody that's sold practices, but more small business type stuff is key. I had a really good CPA that I could ask questions to, and that was key too, because he was able to really direct me in certain ways. And then with the coaching, I was able to, you really need systems in place. No one wants to buy a no matter how much money you make, there's no systems. So systems include things like manuals. Do you have employee manuals? Do you have policies and procedures? Do you have a hiring checklist, a training checklist? Do you have supervisors in place? Like, who's going to supervise it? Because there's two folds when you're selling your practice. There's the part where somebody wants to buy your practice, but they want you to stay on board. They're buying it with you staying for a number of years. Some people don't want to do that. I didn't want to do that in the end. And then there's another one where they buy it and they just take everything and they don't want you a part of it for whatever reason. So you have to kind of decide which one you're wanting to do. So having all of your policies and procedures, everything in place. And then having, like, do you have a supervisor? Do you have somebody who can kind of take over the clinical if somebody is buying it that isn't a therapist? Because that's possible too. And then you get an evaluation. So it's typically a CPA or a business attorney. So they evaluate everything. So they take all of your books, they look through a fine-tooth comb, everything. What do you have in the office that's worth anything? And then weeks later, they just spit out a number to you and say, here's the number that you can sell it for. And then you kind of present that. So whether you have somebody who wants to buy it or you advertise, like, selling my practice for X amount of dollars.
Okay, that's a really helpful walkthrough.
Yeah.
So my mind immediately goes to what we talked about before we started recording, and this aspect of the selling process where while it's in process, you can't discuss it. But if you're advertising or you need to identify somebody, how does that piece work where you obviously want to make sure that it's going to be left in the right hands? And how do you do that and still be respectful of what that process requires?
Yeah, it's tricky because, you have to be careful. Luckily, I'm not sure the legal aspect of offering it and, like, with a number on there. I'm not sure how that is, because once I decided that I was definitely going to sell it, I did have a colleague that was working for me, Jess Mills. She's the owner of the Brave Life Therapy in Indianapolis. She's amazing. But I had somebody who I thought might be interested. Yeah. And so I was able to present that and say, like, is this something or not? Because if it's not, that's fine. And I'll look for others. And she was super, super excited. And I thought she might. But yeah, it kind of looks a couple of different ways, but I know of other businesses that I have consulted with where they're able to advertise, like, it's for this, or this is how much. Typically it's how much is the practice bringing in, so we were bringing in like $500,000 to the practice. And, like, what is that? Like, they want to see that. Is your staff all going to stay on board if you're going to leave? Because that's big too. They don't want a bunch of people, like, leaving ship once they buy it, because then
if you can't disclose that, how do you know?
I know it's tricky. I think you can't disclose it enough when you actually, once you have a buyer, then it's done, because they don't want somebody else to try to offer more, right, and take it from under that person. But yeah, and you also don't want to have all your staff leaving or being confused or things like that. So it's definitely a tricky process especially if you have a large team.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk timeline. So from the time you decided that you were moving and you started getting the ball rolling to the time that it was actually sold, what did that look like?
I would say it's about 1.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, like, it took a while because some systems still needed to be in place. Like, there's some things you just don't know about. So having the attorney and having the CPA on board, having because everything has to be switched over to the new buyer. So you have to have lawyers in place where you basically go through a negotiation phase too, not so much negotiation on price, but negotiation on what's included. So you can do pretty much anything. Do they take the name, or do you keep your name? Do they take the social media, like your account, or do you keep it? Do you get to keep your clients, or do the clients stay with the practice? So you go through, like, every little thing. What stays in the office? So, like, for me, I wanted some of my furniture in my office because it was important to me, and but I didn't really want anything else that was there. But you negotiate, like, every single thing that's in the building, clients, names, website. You keep your website and change the name or whatever. So yeah, it's there. And then once you go through that, then there's a period of just, you're kind of waiting, like, okay, we'll sign at some point. And then there's a short period where you have to then switch everything over. So this is like the new owner, you switch all the accounts, all the bank accounts, all of that. So that once we got to the part where we're transferring everything, that took a good like 3-4 months to like really legally kind of separate everything.
Mm. So reflecting back on the entire process, were you able to walk away and feel really good about the transaction in general?
Yeah, absolutely. She's a very close friend of mine, colleague, a wonderful therapist. So I felt so good. The staff was all really excited to have her in
Mm-hmm.
place. So I think that's part of it. It was definitely really emotional. I think for both of us, but I think for me of just like leaving a town that I had been in my young adult life,
Mm-hmm.
some clients I wouldn't be able to see in person anymore or ever again even. So that was definitely hard, but knowing that like the practice is going to keep thriving because of her and because of the staff, I think helped ease it quite a bit. And just that we had taken the time to really do everything very well. And having the support, I had amazing support from like friends, from family, from colleagues, but also from like I said, mentorship. So I have a couple really close mentors that are
Mm-hmm.
in their own group practice that really helped me emotionally like process through that, which was helpful. So yeah, I walked away feeling great. We moved to Florida a week before all the hurricanes hit in the place the
Wow.
hurricanes hit. So like it was really crazy. So I'm glad I was able to be in a financial place where I could take like several months off and get settled. So that really, I think, helped make the transition a bit easier.
I'm so happy to hear that it worked out the way that it did. Thinking about the two options that you laid out for us and the practice owner staying on for a period of time versus not, what were some of the things that you and the new owner did that really helped to make the transition smooth and for you to feel as good as you did taking that step away?
Yeah, I think being able to really not like rush that process. I think there were still some definitely stressful moments for like a few weeks there just because there's stuff you don't know. So like I thought she could just take over my bank account and that's not the case. So she's got her own bank account. So we had to change all the financial deposits and that was a lot more stressful. But I think going slow, like we were able to be in such a close relationship. We were able to sit down and really have conversations like, what questions do you have that I'm not thinking about? Because I wrote as much down as I could think of and put it in a manual. But there was stuff I just didn't think about too that were my like everyday. And I think for a while she kept saying like, what's your everyday? Walk me through what you do from the time you get in till the end. And there was just little nuances that you forget about. But I think that really helped where we were having meetings that were personal and not just like rigid. I mean, that's the biggest thing too. And both want to invest in it. You both have to be excited about it. And the buying of it and the selling of it, you have to both be really excited that this is the next step so that there's no like difficulties or too much emotional aspects of it.
So knowing that you also, in the midst of everything, transition into the consulting space, what great experience for you to bring into that role, because I know that in my role as a consultant, that is definitely something that is on practitioners' minds.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot more forethought now of what can I be doing to set my practice up so that if there is ever a time where I want to sell, or even some things that we can't necessarily predict that force us to be away from our practice for a period of time, how can we be ensuring that we have the right systems and processes set up? So talk about your transition into consulting and who it is that you work with and what that looks like for those that work with you.
Yeah, I love doing consulting. I've always loved like teaching. I also want people to like thrive. I know there's a lot of practices that do like non-competes and like they don't want you to set up your own practice within 30 miles. And I've just always have such a visceral reaction to that because I just think there's enough people that need therapy to go around. And I hate the gatekeeping. Like teach people so that they can be successful and thrive too. You're not taking anything away from me. If I'm doing a good job, like you're not stealing anything from me. So I love consulting and helping people grow their practice, but also think about what they want to do and what that looks like. How does it align with you and stop doing everything everybody else is doing? Like what really are you wanting to do? So how I got started with that, and I was telling you, like in 2020, I was like by myself, living alone. I didn't have like a little bubble of people. And I had some people reaching out to me that they wanted to start the transition of starting virtually with their clients during the pandemic. And so I was helping them set up their practices virtually, just very like entry level, like here's how you do virtual, here's how you get people started. And slowly people were asking me other questions on group practice and how do you network? How do you market well? How do you find a mentor or an advisor? And so slowly I started teaching people, and I was doing a lot of that for free. I was hosting like online workshops and like teaching people how to do things like that. And then I had people who were like, you should be charging for this. Like, this is amazing. Like, you have years of experience, not only in other spaces, because I'd been a therapist since undergrad, but you have such a knowledge in other things that I never really thought about. And so slowly started to teach people. And then in the last like maybe 3 or 4 years, I do it much more consistently. So I help people who want to start group practices, who want to learn how to hire, because hiring is so stressful. I just did a webinar on like hiring like a pro for therapists, which includes like all the forms that you need, the offer letter for staff, how do you interview well, what interview questions. So helping people really just like streamline their systems across the board. Because if I can make it a little bit easier for you, then you can grow a lot faster. So even just like 1 or 2 sessions with me can help you grow way quicker than if you're going to sit there in front of Google all hours of the night trying to figure out how to do this. Because although there's tons of like workbooks and books and things for that for like small businesses, there's not a lot out there for like therapists. How do you grow your practice as a therapist? How do you do it as a small business? How do you see less clients and make more money? So increasing your pay. So I love teaching those kinds of things. And I do it for everyone all over the country. So I have people in New Jersey and in Florida and California, kind of all over. So, yeah.
Well, how do you structure your process? Is it kind of co-created and very individualized, or do you have a set structure?
Yeah, it's very individualized. So typically, because I always want to make sure if somebody's consulting with me, that I can help you or answer their questions. So there's some people who might have like really in-depth questions on like billing insurance. I've been self-pay for a while. I don't really want to consult with that because I just don't know all the nuances. So I typically will do like a 10 or 15 minute phone call. I have tons of information on my website about what I consult with, what I can help you with, what are your pain points, that kind of thing. And there's like trainings listed and like forums that I sell and stuff like that. But I do a quick phone call to see, I get to know you, you get to know me, and then people will move on to the booking phase. And if they don't, where I'm like, I don't think I can help with that, I give them referrals for other people I think. So I have kind of a list of a couple other consultants that do things I don't do. And then we move on to like a one-on-one. So I do a video session and I ask them to write down all of the questions that they have about their particular group practice. And then I help them suss out some of those questions and just answer. So it's really like individualized, where they just get to like bombard me with questions about how I did my group practice, how I do therapy, how I increased my fees, whatever it is. And it's just one-on-one, whatever helps them. Some people will come one time and then I'll email them a summary follow-up. And then some people will come monthly to just have more of like a coach who I'm mentoring, like, okay, let's have this goal. Let's do this. And people will ask, because I often ask, what's your learning style? How do you learn what's going to be the best for you? I've even had people say, I want to rewatch it so it can be like a slow process. So I've just recorded all of the questions or recorded our meeting and then sent them back to them so they can watch it later. So it's really what is going to be beneficial for you. There's no like packages. There's no one size fits all. There's nothing like that. It's really like what's going to be most beneficial for you. And how do I help you grow? I want you to make money.
Yeah, that's so helpful.
Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit before we started recording about marketing consulting as opposed to marketing a therapy practice and how different it is, and that ability to work with people all over the country like you and I both do, and also how to set us apart, because there is kind of this small pool of mental health practitioners that are in this consulting space. And so anything that you can share that you feel sets you apart, or what has been the most helpful with regard to marketing because I ultimately found you because we're in a lot of the same local Facebook groups because you're originally from Massachusetts?
I am, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so whenever somebody would ask questions about practice and group and consulting, I would always find that we would be in there together, kind of offering guidance or offering our services. And so I knew that I wanted to learn more about what you did. So things that set you apart and things that have been really helpful with marketing in addition to Facebook.
Yeah, I think what sets me apart in some ways is there's no one size fits all. And I think there's another model of consulting where the consultant is, why don't you do this one size fits all? Buy my package, buy my program, and you'll learn everything that you need to learn. And I think that doesn't work for everybody, because I know for me, like, I struggle with dyslexia. I struggle with different learning styles and all that. And I have always found the most helpful to have a consultant that I can pick up the phone and ask a question to. And so that's my learning style. And I think what sets me apart is I want people to find value in whatever type of way that they need to. So if they're like, I want to do a quick 30-minute call today, but then another 30-minute call next week, or I want to do a 3-hour consulting call, like, I'm happy to be really flexible. So I think that that's what sets me apart, like flexibility, being able to schedule people really quickly and easily. So in order to schedule with me, people just text me and say, I saw you on social media. I'd love to schedule a consultation. What do you have available? And I just send it right there. A lot of times when you are needing support, you kind of want it right now. You don't want to have to wait 2 or 3 weeks because those pain points might kind of go away. And so I think setting apart is like being available. I think being available, being like quick, and being flexible. That's what's really set me apart. And being able to be understanding for different levels of practices. So I work with anyone who's like just starting private practice to people who have had a group for a long time and they're in the process of maybe retiring and want to like reduce their hours, or they're even thinking about selling. So kind of across the board. And I think there's other consultants who are only wanting to see one very specific type of person. Yeah.
So out of the range of consulting clients that you work with, is there a particular population you would say really lights you up? What's your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I love working with people who are really motivated, who are excited, like they want to grow and they want to kind of do some of that quickly. They want to do that now, whether that's like hiring staff or just starting a group practice. They've been in solo for years now. So I think people who are really excited, who are like, been thinking about this for a while and I just need to do it. Because if we don't even start, it's never going to happen. And I think there's been so many people, and including myself, where I waited and thought about doing a private practice for like 3 years. Like I was licensed, I was a skilled therapist, and just was scared. I didn't know how to do it. I was so scared of not having like insurance or reliable income or all that. And I started private practice with like literally no money. I had nothing. I wouldn't advise that. It was a very stressful period, but I just did it. And I think I'm really excited about working with people who are like, I've been thinking about this too long. I have to do it. What's the first step? Like, I love that. And I love the people who are ready, who are excited about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So for those listening that would be interested in working with you, what is the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, they can either text me if they want to just get a quick response. My number is 317-643-0507, or find me on my website. I have tons of information about my consulting stuff, even therapy. I still do some therapy, and it's therapyforcyclebreakers.com. And there's a little button at the top that says for therapists. And if they click that, they learn everything about my consulting, my fees. I also sell like some forms to like manuals, all the things that I did to sell my practice, I sell on there as well. So yeah, pretty easy to find. I'm also on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Therapy for Cycle Breakers.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Everything that you shared. I wish you the best of luck with this practice. And I think that there were a lot of valuable takeaways for those listening. So
really, thank you so much. I'm so glad you reached out to me, and I'm excited to learn more about your podcast. And I love it. And this has been so great.
Thank you.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only. and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.